Hello my crochet friends, this is Sarah from Ned and Mimi, and in this video we are going to work a very simple single crochet border all around the edge of our work. So I have a little sample here that I have done in 3 different stitches. So the bottom section here is 4 rows of double crochet, the middle section is 4 rows of half double crochet, and then the top section is 4 rows of single crochets. And I did it this way because I wanted to show you how we work into the sides of each of the different stitches. So this can be one of the trickiest things with crochet, is working into the side of your work, because it's difficult to know how many stitches you need to work for each row, where to insert your hook, and so on. So we're going to cover all of that today. Now the first question you might have when crocheting a border is, where do you start? So the answer is somewhere between it depends and it doesn't really matter. So the first thing I would do is decide what is the right side of your work. So for me, this is the right side. This was my first row. So I have decided that I have started on the right side and then I finished off on the wrong side. So I am going to begin my border in this corner up here. Now, if you have been working an odd number of rows and your last row here is the right side, you could actually start the border here and just keep going down around and all the way back to the start. So it honestly doesn't really matter. And if you decide to do your border the same color as your final row, it's even easier because you don't even need to cut your yarn and change color or anything. You can just start and go all the way around. So for demonstration purposes, I have decided to use a different color yarn for my border. So I'm going to grab that now and I will just join it in here to the top corner. Now I have some ends here at the back that I haven't woven in, so it's probably a good idea to do that first. You can work over them as you're working the border, but it might be a little bit bulky. So if you can bring yourself to do it, go ahead and weave in those ends. Alrighty, so my ends are gone, they are woven in and we're ready to go on to the border now. So I'm just going to grab my color for the border and I'm going to just insert my hook into this stitch here on the top right corner, yarn over and pull up a loop and chain 1, and that chain does not count as a stitch. Now I'm simply just going to single crochet all the way along that top row. So starting in the first stitch, so the stitch that we joined into, and I'm actually just going to work over the tail as well as I go here, but if you prefer you could just leave it to weave in later as well. So here we are at the last stitch of the row, and now what we need to do is turn the corner and start working down along this left edge here. So there are a couple of different ways to turn the corner. You might have seen others do a single crochet, chain 2, and then a single crochet in the same stitch, and that will bring you around the corner. But my favorite way actually is to work 3 single crochets into this last stitch, and that will also bring me to the next edge. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm just going to work another 2 single crochets into that exact same spot here. Okay, and that brings me nicely around the corner. And this center single crochet of those 3, that's my corner stitch. So if I was going to work a border with multiple rows, that would be the corner from this point onwards. Now, working into the sides of single crochet rows is actually pretty easy because we're just going to work 1 stitch for each row. So for the first row, we've actually already worked into the side of it. So we're counting that 3rd single crochet there as our side stitch as well. So now I'm going to work another single crochet into each of these 3 rows. Now you might have seen different ways to do this. The way I like to work into the edges of my crochet is to go through the stitches. So rather than going all the way around the stitch like this, which I feel gives a bit of a gap, I don't really like that. I go right through the middle of the stitch. And fortunately with single crochets, it's pretty easy to do that. So that is, we have 1, 2, we have 2 more to do. So the next one is a little bit tricky because this was the row with the turning chain. So just find an entry point there that feels natural and easy. And let's do the same in the next stitch. So there we go. So that they're the single crochet rows done. So that's very easy. Now, half double crochet is a little bit trickier because a half double crochet is effectively 1.5 times the height of a single crochet. So for our half double crochets, usually what we'll do is we'll work 2 stitches for one row and then 1 for the next, then 2 for one row and then 1 for the next. So here I have 4 rows of half double crochet. So I'm going to expect to have 6 edge stitches. So let's go ahead and do that now. So the first entry point is usually pretty easy. It's just going to be into the same position here as this last stitch was worked. So in we go there. Then I'm going to go through the body of the stitch for the next one. Then I have my next half double here. I'm going to go right through the center of that stitch as well. Then into the top of the next stitch. So how many have we done now? We've done 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'm going to go through the next one. And then finally through the last one to give us 6 edge stitches there for our half double crochets. Okay, so that is looking pretty neat. I'm pretty happy with that. So now getting straight onto our double crochets. So these are a little bit more straightforward than the half double. So for each double crochet row, we're going to work 2 single crochets as part of our edge round. So I have 4 rows here, so I'm going to work 8 more single crochets to get me to the bottom edge. So for this row here, what I have at the edge is actually my turning chain 3. So again, you might see some people go right around that turning chain, which is fine if you want to do it. I just find that it leaves a little bit of a large gap that I don't like. So I'm just going to go right through the center of that chain. So this is a little bit more of an art than a science. So just find a place that feels natural and pop your hook in there. Okay, so that is the first 2 done. Now let's move on to the next row. And we'll work 2 more through the body of that stitch. We're on to a chain 3 again here, I think. And finally, let's finish off with 2 more down in this bottom corner. Okay, so that is that edge worked and it's looking pretty good. And remember, if you are working this row in the same color as your panel, it's going to blend in much, much better. So now we need to turn the corner again. So we're going to do the exact same as we did up here. I'm just going to work 2 additional single crochets into this same spot. And that will bring us nicely around to the bottom edge. So the bottom edge is super easy. We just need to continue single crocheting all along, just as we did for the top edge. Alrighty, so we are at this bottom corner, and again we're just going to turn in exactly the same way. So work 2 more single crochets in there, and that's the corner turned. Okay, so we're almost there. We're just going to continue working up along this edge and then we'll be back to the start. So just one tiny thing to remember here. Once you've turned the corner, this last corner stitch counts as the first stitch in the side. So I actually only need to work 1 single crochet in here to count as my 2 single crochets for this first row. So just keep an eye on that, because sometimes you might find that you end up with too many stitches, and this could be why. Okay, so I'm almost back to the start, back to my first stitch. So I've worked 3 stitches here for each of these 3 single crochet rows. So I've just 1 more row left to take care of. So what I'm going to do now is actually complete this corner. So we have 3 stitches in each corner here, and we need to do the same for the last one. So I'm going to simply work 2 single crochets into the same spot here where I started. So that stitch counts as the stitch for the side of the last row, and then we have our corner stitch to finish things off. So there we go, that is our border worked. Now you might find that some edges are a little bit neater than others, so I definitely found this edge a little bit trickier to work into, and I think that was because I had my colour changes here and I had my ends here. So if that happens, don't worry. As I said earlier, this is an art, not a science. You can always go back and try to correct any little things you're not happy with, and just remember that all of your crochet items are handmade and the little tiny imperfections are part of the beauty. So I've just one last thing to do now, and that is to finish off my row. Now you have a couple of options here. You can slip stitch back to this first stitch like so and fasten off. However, I feel that that slip stitch is a little bit too conspicuous for me. So what I'm going to do is finish with an invisible join. So to do that, I am going to just cut my yarn, leave a nice long tail for weaving in, and I'll pull all the way through. Then I'm going to grab my yarn needle and now what I'm going to do is insert it under both loops of that very first single crochet here. So from bottom to top through both loops, and just pull it very gently through. So what we're going to do here is create kind of a false stitch just to hide the end of the round. So the next step is to go back to the last stitch that you worked and insert your needle right through the middle of that stitch and all the way out the back, and then again just pull gently, and there's your false stitch made and your invisible join done. Then you can just flip around to the back and weave in that end. So I like to just go down through that little bump at the back and then just weave in my ends as normal. And that is it. That is your border done. I really hope you have enjoyed this tutorial, and if you do have a second to like this video and subscribe, that would be absolutely amazing. I have lots more tutorials and patterns on my website nedandmimi.com, so do check those out. Happy crocheting and take care.